안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 너무 졸려요. 야간 2일차입니다. 지금 태풍이 올라오고 있어서 비가 오고 있어요. 밖에서는. 오늘 분리수거도 해야 되는 날이어서 너무 힘듭니다. 그래도 운동을 해야겠죠. 너무 많이 싫어. 제발 진짜 오늘은 코로나 확진자가 200명 밑으로 떨어졌으면 좋겠습니다. 운동하겠습니다. 팔굽혀펴기랑 복근 운동 위주로 하고 체력 남으면 스쿼트도 같이 할게요.
Shooting the guy in the back many times. I mean, couldn't you have done something different? Couldn't you have wrestled him? You know, I mean,
Good news.
in the meantime, he might have been going for a weapon, and you know, there's a whole big thing there. But they choke, just like in a golf tournament. They miss a 3-foot.
You're not comparing it to golf because, of course, that's what the media.
I'm saying people choke.
People.
He did compare it to golf. Chief McKinnon, you served on the police force for 25 years. Are these shootings just like choking at golf, or is there, in fact, systemic racism by police?
I gotta let me say this. As a person who's been involved in law enforcement since 1965, who was shot at by fellow officers, who was beaten up by officers, I would ask anyone who says there's no systemic racism within our police departments around this country to interview not only people like myself, but all of the black police chiefs, all of the black police officers in this country, ask them if they believe there's systemic racism. For officers who suffered worse than I have, they know and they've seen this. You know, I just did an interview with a station in which they interviewed myself. I interviewed a young lady who's 20 years younger, who's retired from LAPD, and a young man from the Ohio Police Department who's 20 years younger. So we have 40 years difference, and we're all talking the same thing. Certainly, this racism exists, and until we get a handle on telling the truth about it, we just continue to have these kinds of problems.
What have you experienced? You said you believe it exists. What have you experienced personally?
Well, when I was 14 years old, I was severely beaten up by Detroit police. I was a young man, 14, and that's why I became a police officer. And I made myself a promise at the time that I was going to become different and make sure that I would join the Detroit Police Department and make sure that those kinds of things did not happen to me or to other people like me. Ironically, as I joined the Detroit Police Department, I realized that there's so many officers who still maintain or manifested those same kinds of ideas and thoughts that those officers beat me up. I stopped officers from beating people up. In addition to that, I talked to police chiefs when I was chief, and every black police chief said that he or she had experienced similar kinds of things that I did. So, you know, when someone says there's no systemic racism, you know, you have it not only in the police department, you have it in the military, you have it in so many different areas within our country.
And in the historical context, why is that significant, Van?
너무 하기 싫어.
Well, look, I think that we are, we had an opportunity this summer, and I think it's still present. A real continent of common ground kind of emerged out of the ocean of tears shed justifiably for what happened to Mr. George Floyd. People felt, hey, this isn't right. And that video brought something out in ordinary people. They wanted to see something done. Now, the legislation is stuck in Congress. but there's an opportunity to move something forward. The presidential contest could be a contest of who has the better solutions to getting policing that works for more people. Instead, it's now divided into this like law and order, as if people of color don't want law and don't want order. And so that's, I think, a big mistake, and it's unfortunate.
Well, so to that point, Ben, what struck me in listening to the president today, he was so focused on thanking law enforcement, and just simply wanted to avoid the question when he was pressed further on systemic racism. But like Ben pointed out, you can still want law and order, you can thank police officers, but you can acknowledge that there's a problem here.
I think the chief's points were right on point. As he spoke, I thought about all the black officers who I met with when I was running the NAACP. I mean, even just state troopers across this country, just massive problems with racism on the force. Officers in cities across this country who are afraid to be in plainclothes because they're afraid they're going to be shot. It brought me back to my own first experiences with racial profiling and the fears that it creates. My grandfather, who was on law enforcement, whenever we would drive outside of Baltimore City, we'd drive like 10 miles below the speed limit, and it would drive me crazy because we were going to the beach. But he was afraid of what his fellow members of law enforcement might do to our family. And so the issue of systemic racism in law enforcement is simply one that you cannot deny. And to have a president who, on the one hand, refuses to condemn vigilantes that kill people, on the other hand, refuses to meet with the family of a man who's been shot by an officer 7 times on the back, and then on the other hand, refuses to admit that systemic racism exists on the force, Fan pointed out, is just wildly out of step with what most people in both parties understand.
Chief McKenna, I want to give the final thoughts to you. What kind of an impact does it have
졸림과
when the president
여러 가지
sends out a message
복잡한
like
이
this?
심정들이
Well, it's a tremendous impact because to certain people, obviously. But let me say this.
요 근래 너무 열심히 했잖아요. 잠깐 이렇게 대충 하는 날도 있어야 되지 않겠습니까? 여기까지 하겠습니다.
In this country, and the greatest number of people are people of color. Even if you go to